The star cluster shimmered against the black canvas of space, its purple and blue hues casting an eerie glow through the viewing window of Research Station Epsilon. The small station orbited quietly at the edge of human space, far from the bustling central whirls, but rich with scientific opportunity. Dr. Mark Wilson yawned and rubbed his tired eyes. 3 months on this remote outpost had yielded fascinating data about the strange radiation patterns from the nearby dwarf star, but he missed Earth's simple pleasures: real coffee, rain, and open skies. "You should sleep," said Dr. Anna Jones, looking up from her console. "I can monitor the scans." Mark shook his head. "Something's different tonight." The readings from the moon's surface changed. The small rocky moon had been their secondary project, a seemingly dead world with unusual mineral compositions. Their team of 6 researchers had been collecting data for weeks, but Mark had recently noticed odd energy patterns that defied explanation. "Look here," he pointed to a series of blips on the screen. "These readings suggest some kind of organized activity." Anna leaned closer. "Could be natural geothermal processes. Or not." Mark's voice dropped to a whisper. "What if we're not alone out here?" The thought hung in the air between them. Humanity had spread across dozens of star systems, but had yet to encounter other intelligent life. Many had begun to think they were alone in the universe. "I should report this to Earth Command," Mark decided, reaching for the communication panel. The station shuddered suddenly. "What was that?" Anna's voice tightened with concern. The alarm system blared to life, red warning lights bathing the room in crimson. "Unknown vessel detected," the automated system announced calmly. "Distance: 500 meters and approaching." They rushed to the observation window. Outside, a sleek ship unlike any human design glided toward them. Its surface was dark and smooth, absorbing rather than reflecting light, with strange angular protrusions jutting from its hull. "First contact," Mark whispered, his heart racing. This was what every space explorer dreamed of and feared. He pressed the emergency broadcast button. "This is Research Station Epsilon. We have encountered an unknown vessel. We are attempting communication and—" The alien ship fired without warning. A beam of intense green energy sliced through the station's outer hull like it was paper. Warning sirens screamed as the pressure began to drop. "Emergency protocols," Anna shouted, rushing toward the escape pods. "Everyone evacuate." The ship fired again. This time, the beam struck the station's core. Mark watched in horror as the power systems overloaded. A series of explosions rippled through the station. "Why are they attacking us?" he gasped as another blast rocked the station. The other researchers scrambled toward the escape pods, but Mark stayed at the communication panel, desperately trying to transmit data back to Earth. "This is Dr. Mark Wilson of Research Station Epsilon." He spoke clearly into the recorder as the station crumbled around him. "We are under attack by an unknown alien vessel. They fired without provocation or attempt at communication. The data I'm sending contains everything we know about them. If anyone receives this—" The final blast tore through the command center. In his last conscious moment, Mark hit the emergency beacon launch button. The small, hardened Deva capsule shot away from the disintegrating station, carrying his final message and video footage of the attack. Within minutes, Research Station Epsilon was nothing but debris floating in space. The alien vessel lingered briefly, scanning the wreckage, then vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The emergency beacon continued its lonely journey toward Earth, carrying news that would forever change human history. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and their first contact had been violent. War was coming. The emergency beacon landed at the United Earth Defense Headquarters with a soft thud. No one expected its contents would shake humanity to its core. Admiral John Stone stood at the head of the long table in the war room, his weathered face grim as the recording played for the 12th time. The gathered military leaders and government officials watched in stunned silence as Research Station Epsilon was destroyed and Dr. Wilson died before their eyes. "Play it again," ordered President Laura Davis, her voice steady despite the shock evident in her eyes. The room darkened once more as the footage replayed. The strange alien ship, the unprovoked attack, the final desperate message from Dr. Wilson. When the lights came back on, the president stood. This changes everything. We are not alone, and our first contact has shown us what we face. Admiral Stone nodded. Madam President, I recommend we activate Protocol Omega. A murmur swept through the room. Protocol Omega had been created 100 years ago, but never implemented. A contingency plan for exactly this scenario. Hostile alien contact. That's extreme, said General Ross, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. We're talking about deploying our entire hidden fleet, resources we've been building in secret for generations. One human was killed, said Defense Minister Taylor. Is that worth risking everything? Admiral Stone slammed his fist on the table. One human today. How many tomorrow? This was an unprovoked attack on a research station. They didn't even try to communicate. They simply killed. The room fell silent. John, the president said softly, using the admiral's first name, you knew someone on that station, didn't you? Stone's jaw tightened. Dr. Wilson was my nephew's teacher at the academy. But that's not why I'm recommending this action. I'm recommending it because if we don't respond with overwhelming force now, we show weakness. And weakness invites destruction. Stone walked to the central display and brought up a holographic map of known space. For 200 years, we've been building warships in secret, hidden in asteroid belts, disguised as mining operations, concealed in gas clouds. 500,000 vessels, each capable of devastating firepower. The officials gasped. Most knew about the secret fleet, but few realized its true size. We built them hoping never to use them. Stone continued. But now we face a species that kills without provocation or communication. We must respond in a language they will understand. President Davis circled the table slowly, studying the faces of her advisors. If we deploy the Guardian fleet, there's no going back. We reveal our true military strength to the galaxy. Better that than to be extinct, Stone replied. Dr. Wilson was just one man, but his death represents an attack on all humanity. How we respond defines who we are. The room fell into debate. Some argued for caution, for attempting communication before military action. Others feared showing restraint would be interpreted as weakness. After hours of discussion, President Davis raised her hand for silence. We will activate Protocol Omega, she announced, but with conditions. The fleet will deploy to contain this alien threat, but we will attempt communication before engaging. We will offer one chance for explanation and apology. She turned to Admiral Stone. And if they refuse or attack again, his eyes hardened. Then we show them the full might of humanity. Within hours, secret commands went out across the solar systems. Hidden shipyards powered up. Dormant warships awakened. Crews who had trained for years in simulation finally boarded real vessels. Across the vastness of space, the Guardian fleet began to assemble. Humanity's hidden sword, forged over centuries, and finally drawn. One human had died. 500,000 warships would answer. The bridge of the flagship *Deterrent* hummed with tense energy as Admiral Stone watched the main view screen. A vast armada of human ships surrounded him. The first wave of the Guardian fleet, 100,000 strong. The remaining 400,000 vessels waited at strategic points, hidden but ready. We've reached the border of what we believe is their territory, sir, announced Commander Riley, her fingers dancing across the tactical display. No sign they've detected us yet. Stone nodded. The journey had taken 3 weeks at maximum speed. 3 weeks of preparation, of studying the limited data from Dr. Wilson's final transmission. 3 weeks of wondering what kind of beings could attack without warning or attempt at communication. Commence first contact protocol, Stone ordered. Broadcast on all frequencies, all languages. The communication officer nodded. Broadcasting now, sir. Stone stepped forward. His message was simple. This is Admiral John Stone of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We seek contact with the species responsible for the unprovoked attack on Research Station Epsilon and the murder of Dr. Mark Wilson. We demand communication and explanation. Minutes stretched into an hour. The fleet waited in perfect formation. "Sir," Riley said suddenly, "we're detecting movement. Multiple vessels approaching." The view screen shifted to show a group of sleek ships, identical to the one that had destroyed the research station. They moved with unnatural precision, forming a perfect geometric pattern. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. The view screen flickered, revealing a humanoid figure with pale blue skin, large black eyes, and no visible nose or ears. When it spoke, its thin lips barely moved, but the translation system converted its sounds to English. "Human vessels, you trespass in Vex Dominion space. Your presence is an act of aggression." The alien's voice was flat, emotionless. "Withdraw immediately." Stone stepped forward. "We come seeking justice for an unprovoked attack on a peaceful research station." The alien's head tilted slightly. "You refer to the elimination of a monitoring post in Sector 9. One human death is insignificant. It violated our territory." The response was proportional. Murmurs of anger rippled through the bridge. Stone kept his voice steady. "In human culture, the deliberate taking of an innocent life is never insignificant. We demand the individuals responsible face justice." For the first time, the alien's expression changed. Something like surprise flickered across its features. "You mobilized this many vessels over a single death. Irrational. Your species clearly lacks proper value calculation." "This is only a fraction of our response," Stone replied coldly. "Will you surrender those responsible, or must we take more direct action?" The alien's eyes narrowed. "We calculate your fleet at approximately 100,000 vessels. Impressive, but not sufficient to threaten the Vex Dominion. Your ultimatum is rejected." Without warning, the Vex ships opened fire. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out, striking 50 human ships before defensive systems could respond. "Return fire," Stone commanded. Tactical pattern Delta. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, absorbing the attack while targeting the Vex ship's weapons systems with pinpoint accuracy. "Sir," Riley said, excitement in her voice, "they're completely unaware of our technological capabilities. Their shields can't withstand our targeting systems." Stone nodded grimly. "Send the signal. Deploy the full fleet." Across vast distances of space, the remainder of humanity's hidden armada received the command. 400,000 warships emerged from hiding, surrounding Vex space from all directions. On the main view screen, the Vex commander's expression changed to one of shock as new alerts clearly sounded on their bridge. What is this?" the alien demanded, its emotionless voice breaking. "Impossible." "This," Admiral Stone said quietly, "is humanity's response when one of our own is killed. One human life may seem insignificant to you. Let's see if 500,000 warships can change your perspective." The true battle was about to begin. Supreme Commander Dex of the Vex Dominion stared at the holographic display in disbelief. What had begun as a simple defensive action against 100,000 human vessels had transformed into a nightmare. The sensors couldn't stop beeping as more and more human warships appeared from seemingly nowhere. "Final count confirmed," his tactical officer reported, voice trembling. 500,000 human warships have surrounded our territory. They've established a complete blockade of all 37 Vex systems. The command center fell silent. The Vex military consisted of only 2,000 combat vessels. The humans had deployed 250 times that number. "Impossible," Dex whispered. "No civilization could hide such military might." On the main screen, the human admiral's face appeared again. "This is Admiral Stone. Your forces have been contained. We can destroy your entire military without suffering significant losses. However, We prefer to resolve this without further bloodshed. Dex struggled to understand. The Vex had eliminated threats to their territory for centuries using simple calculations, minimal force required to achieve desired outcomes. They had destroyed one small station and killed one human. By any reasonable calculation, the human response should have been similarly proportional. "The Emperor demands to speak with you," an aide whispered urgently to Dex. The screen split to show Emperor Lex, the supreme ruler of the Vex Dominion. For the first time in recorded history, the Emperor looked afraid. "Commander, explain how we face annihilation over the death of a single human," the Emperor demanded. Dex had no answer. Their response defies all logic, Your Eminence. In private chambers on his flagship, Admiral Stone received the transmission request from the Vex Emperor. He accepted it, sitting straight in his command chair. "Emperor Lex of the Vex Dominion," Stone acknowledged coolly. "Are you prepared to surrender those responsible for the attack on our research station?" The Emperor's large black eyes blinked rapidly. "Admiral, there seems to be a severe misunderstanding between our species. We eliminated a single outpost that violated our territory. One life was lost. Your response is—" He struggled for words, astronomically disproportionate. Stone leaned forward. "Let me be clear, Emperor. Humans don't calculate the value of life the way you apparently do. To us, Dr. Wilson wasn't a statistic. He was a person with dreams, relationships, and potential. His murder wasn't a proportional response to anything. It was an atrocity. But to mobilize your entire military," the Emperor began. "Not our entire military," Stone interrupted. "Just our Guardian fleet. And yes, we built it precisely for this moment. First contact with a hostile species that doesn't value life as we do. Around the Vex homeworld, human ships began systematic operations. With surgical precision, they disabled Vex defense platforms, communication relays, and military installations. Not a single civilian target was hit. Our ships are neutralizing your military capacity," Stone explained calmly. "We could destroy your civilization entirely. But unlike you, we place value on all sentient life, even yours." On a dozen Vex worlds, populations watched in terror as human warships appeared in their skies, awesome and terrible in their silent power. Children pointed upward, asking questions their parents couldn't answer. In the Vex High Council chamber, advisors frantically debated options. "We have no choice but surrender," the defense minister said. "Their technology exceeds ours. Their numbers overwhelm us. And most disturbing, they seem to operate on incomprehensible moral principles." Emperor Lex stared at the tactical display, showing the human armada surrounding his empire. "All this," he whispered, "over one death." As the Emperor prepared to formally surrender, a disturbing thought occurred to him. If this was how humans responded to the death of one of their kind, what terrible logic drove them? What kind of species would build such overwhelming force and hide it among the stars, waiting for the day they might need it? For the first time, the Vex began to feel something unfamiliar: fear of the unknown. The grand meeting hall aboard the human flagship *Deterrent* had been quickly modified to accommodate the physiology of the Vex delegation. The air mixture was adjusted, the lighting dimmed to suit their sensitive eyes, and the temperature lowered several degrees. Emperor Lex entered flanked by his advisors, their blue skin appearing almost luminous in the subdued lighting. Across the polished table sat Admiral Stone and the human diplomatic team. The contrast between the species was striking. The tall, angular Vex with their large eyes and minimal facial features, facing the more expressive humans. "We are prepared to discuss terms of surrender," Emperor Lex began without preamble, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into English. "However, we request understanding of why such overwhelming force was deployed." Admiral Stone nodded to Dr. Helen Peters, Earth's foremost cynoanthropologist. She had been studying the limited data on Vex society since the crisis began. "Your Eminence," she began, We believe we're facing a profound cultural misunderstanding. Based on your communications, the Vex appear to value life using numerical and utilitarian calculations. Is this correct? The Emperor tilted his head in the Vex equivalent of affirmation. All decisions are made using the calculation of worth. One life against territorial security presents a simple equation with an obvious solution. Dr. Peters nodded. This explains much. Humans don't operate this way. For us, each individual life has inherent value that cannot be calculated or weighed against practical concerns. The Vex delegation exchanged glances of confusion. Impossible, stated the Vex science minister. How can you function as a society without proper value calculations? How do you allocate resources, make military decisions, determine medical priorities? We do make difficult choices, Admiral Stone interjected. But we start from the principle that every life matters. When Dr. Wilson was killed without warning or attempt at communication, it wasn't just one death to us. It was an attack on our core values. For the first time, the Emperor showed something resembling understanding. So your massive military response wasn't about the single human at all. It was about the principle. Exactly, Dr. Peters confirmed. In human history, societies that devalued individual lives caused our greatest atrocities. Our response to your attack wasn't just strategic. It was moral. The Emperor turned to his cultural advisor. Is it possible we fundamentally misunderstood these humans from the beginning? The advisor nodded slowly. The human station was collecting scientific data, not military intelligence as we assumed. Their research was focused on the unusual stellar phenomena, not our territory. An uncomfortable silence filled the room as the implications sank in. Dr. Wilson was studying the unique radiation patterns from our star cluster, Admiral Stone explained quietly. His work was peaceful. His death was needless. Emperor Lex's large eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress. If we had understood your species valued individual life so highly, we would have attempted communication instead of elimination. Dr. Peters leaned forward. This is where we must begin, with understanding. Your society operates on collective utility. Ours champions individual worth. Both have strengths and weaknesses. The Vex delegation conferred briefly in their own language before the Emperor spoke again. This misunderstanding has brought us to the brink of extinction. Our entire civilization exists because you chose restraint despite your overwhelming military advantage. Admiral Stone nodded solemnly. Because unlike the attack on our station, we sought to understand before we acted. Then perhaps, the Emperor said slowly, there is something valuable my people can learn from yours. As the diplomatic talks continued into the night, a fundamental shift was occurring in both species' understanding of the universe. The humans realized they had encountered a civilization with entirely different ethical foundations, while the Vex began to grasp a new concept, that value could exist beyond calculation. Both sides recognized that bridging this philosophical gap would be difficult, but necessary if they hoped to transform this near disaster into a foundation for peace. 3 days after the initial peace talks, the Grand Council chamber on the Deterrent buzzed with activity. Human and Vex diplomats worked together, creating a framework for the future. The tension remained, but it had transformed into something productive. Admiral Stone studied the document before him. The peace accord outlined terms of surrender, but also established a path forward. He looked up as Emperor Lex entered the chamber. Your final terms are acceptable, the Emperor announced without greeting. The Vex Dominion will submit to the following conditions. First, those responsible for the attack on your research station will be handed over for trial under human justice. Second, we will establish permanent communication channels between our civilizations. Third, we will accept human observers in our territory to prevent future misunderstandings. Stone nodded. And fourth, as we discussed, your scientists will work with ours to develop a shared ethical framework that respects both our values. This last condition had been most difficult to negotiate. The Vex couldn't simply abandon their calculation-based ethics overnight, but they had agreed to expand their understanding. There is one matter we must address, Stone continued. The individuals directly responsible for Dr. Wilson's death. The Emperor signaled, and 3 Vex military officers were brought forward, their postures showing clear submission. Commander Tix ordered the attack, the Emperor explained. Officers Nix and Jix carried it out. They acted according to our protocols for territorial violations, but we acknowledge now these protocols were flawed. Stone studied the 3 Vex. They showed no fear, only confusion. They genuinely couldn't understand why their actions warranted such consequences. I want them to see something, Stone said quietly. The view screen activated, showing images from Earth. Dr. Wilson's parents receiving news of their son's death. His colleagues at the Science Academy holding a memorial. Children placing flowers at a spontaneous shrine. Crowds holding candles in vigils across multiple worlds. This is what one death means to humans, Stone explained. Not a statistic, not a proportional response. A wound in our collective heart. For the first time, the Vex officers showed signs of understanding. Their large eyes blinked rapidly as they processed these unfamiliar concepts. Commander Tix stepped forward. We did not understand. In Vex culture, death is calculated as resource loss and productivity end. These emotions are not part of our equations. That's why you will not face execution, Stone replied. You acted from your cultural understanding, but you will face justice in a human court, and you will then spend 10 years teaching other Vex about human values as part of your rehabilitation. Some human military advisors had wanted harsher punishment, even execution, but Stone had argued that such actions would only reinforce the very value system they were trying to change. Later that day, in a private meeting, General Baker confronted Stone. You're being too soft, Baker insisted. They murdered Wilson without a second thought. We could crush their entire civilization with a single command. Stone shook his head. And then we'd be no better than they were. The moment we start calculating lives as just numbers, we lose what makes us human. Baker scoffed. 500,000 warships say we can do whatever we want. That's precisely why we must show restraint, Stone replied firmly. Power without compassion is just tyranny. On the Vex homeworld, citizens watched the news with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Instead of destroying their planets, the humans were establishing cultural exchange programs. Instead of executing their leaders, they were teaching them new concepts. They are so strange, a Vex parent told its child as they watched humans disembarking from a shuttle. They build the greatest war fleet ever seen, surround our worlds, and then use this position to talk. The child blinked its large eyes. Perhaps there are calculations we haven't considered yet. Indeed, across the Vex Dominion, a new idea was taking root, that perhaps some things couldn't be calculated at all. 1 year after the near war between humans and the Vex, the rebuilt research station Epsilon orbited in the same location where Dr. Mark Wilson had made his discovery and lost his life. But this time, it was twice as large and staffed by both human and Vex researchers. At the center of the station stood a simple memorial garden. A life-size statue of Dr. Wilson looked out at the stars, his hand extended as if reaching for knowledge. Beneath it, a plaque read, "One life can change the universe." Today, the station buzzed with unusual activity. Dignitaries from both civilizations gathered for a ceremony that would mark a new chapter in their shared history. Admiral Stone, now wearing the formal white uniform of a diplomatic envoy, watched as Emperor Lex approached the memorial. The Vex leader had changed over the past year. He had insisted on learning human customs and had even adopted some human gestures. "Admiral," the Emperor greeted, extending his hand in the human style. "Today we honor the one whose death nearly led to war, but ultimately brought understanding." Stone shook the offered hand. "And we celebrate how far we've come." The crowd quieted as they moved to the main observation deck. Through the vast windows, they could see hundreds of ships from both fleets floating in formation, a symbolic display of cooperation rather than confrontation. Dr. Helen Peters stepped forward to the podium. In the past year, she had become the leading expert on cross-species ethics. "Today we sign the Galactic Sentience Accords," she announced, "a framework that recognizes the inherent value of all intelligent life, regardless of species, while respecting cultural differences in how that value is expressed." The document lay on a simple table. It had taken months of negotiation, with passionate debates on both sides. The Vex had struggled to understand human concepts like dignity and rights, while humans had difficulty grasping the Vex emphasis on collective over individual needs. Emperor Lex spoke next. "When we killed Dr. Wilson, we calculated it as one insignificant life. We could not have been more wrong. That single death revealed the true nature of humanity. A species that built an armada of 500,000 warships, not primarily to destroy, but to protect the principle that every life matters." As the leaders signed the historic document, a small group entered from a side door. 3 Vex officers, Tix, Nix, and Jix, now stood before the gathering. They had served 1 year of their sentence in human custody, learning about the culture of the people they had harmed. Commander Tix stepped forward. "We have a gift," he announced. They unveiled a small data crystal and inserted it into the station's system. The screens lit up with images of stars, planets, and complex mathematical equations. "We discovered these in the backup data from Dr. Wilson's research," Tix explained. "He was not merely studying stars. He had detected our communications and was attempting to create a translation matrix to speak with us peacefully." A stunned silence fell over the gathering. "The man we killed," Tix continued, his voice carrying new emotional cadence learned from humans, "was trying to build a bridge between our species. We destroyed him before he could complete it. The greatest tragedy is not just that one life ended, but that it ended while reaching out to us." Admiral Stone fought back unexpected tears. "Then we will complete his work." The ceremony concluded with an announcement that transformed the original Guardian fleet. The 500,000 warships would be partially decommissioned. Half would remain as defensive forces. The other half would be converted into exploration vessels, scientific platforms, and diplomatic carriers, continuing Dr. Wilson's true mission of peaceful contact. As the dignitaries departed, Admiral Stone remained alone at the memorial. He placed his hand on the statue's outstretched arm. "You would have liked how this turned out," he whispered. "One life ended. Billions changed forever." Outside the viewport, human and Vex ships began their first joint mission, a journey to contact other intelligent species, carrying the lessons learned at such great cost.